Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Peres coming to you from Baltimore. An Israeli military court convicted Israeli soldier Elor Azaria of manslaughter on Wednesday for the assassination of Fatah al-Sharif. Last March, the Israeli soldier was captured on video executing wounded Palestinian Fatah al-Sharif in cold blood in the Israeli-occupied city of Hebron in the West Bank. The soldiers' court-martial has been a controversial and politically divisive situation in Israel. Fatah al-Sharif's father said the Israeli verdict pronounced him guilty, and that is a good step. Not bad, he said. We hope that the sentencing will be fair. On to talk about the court-martial with us is Shir Hever, journalist with the Real News Network based in Heidelberg, Germany. Thanks for joining us, Shir.
Thanks for having me, Sharmini.
So, Shir, the video, which was taken on March 24th of last year, clearly shows Elor Azaria shooting Palestinian Fatah al-Sharif in cold blood. Shir, explain what happened during that shooting and why the soldier was charged with manslaughter and not murder, which would have carried a heavier sentence.
Well, the event that happened was that Israeli soldiers standing in the city center of Hebron with their guns claim that Fatah al-Sharif attacked them and attempted some kind of attack against them. There was never a trial. He was a suspect, but they have already shot him and he was lying on the ground bleeding when Elor Azaria walked up calmly to him 11 minutes later and shot him in the head and killed him. So obviously a case of premeditated murder. But in the Israeli context, it's just not possible for Israeli soldiers to murder Palestinians. Not legally possible. It just never happens. Every time an Israeli soldier kills a Palestinian, they're only charged with manslaughter or shooting against regulations or some other kind of trumped up charge. And there's just no precedent for Israeli soldiers being charged or convicted of murder, except for extreme cases more than 30 years ago. And I think that is part of an unwritten policy. There's no specific law in Israel that says that soldiers cannot be charged of murder, but it's just an unwritten policy which gives a free hand to Israeli soldiers.
In the last year, Shir, more than 240 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli soldiers. Other than Elor Azaria, many others have not really been held accountable for their action. Why is it that this case was court-martialed and not the others?
The reason is very simple. This was caught on video. There was a camera, and so there was no way to deny the fact that Elor Azaria is the perpetrator.
And what makes this particular killing of Fatah al-Sharif so politically fueled when it seemed very, very plain through the video that he should be held accountable?
Well, the defense of Elor Azaria in the court was very confused. Actually, it was a terrible defense, trying to say that maybe it was not Elor Azaria who killed him, and maybe Fatah al-Sharif had a suicide belt strapped to him, and other such arguments that were easily disproved. But the main issue here is an ethnic division within Israel, because most of the killings of Palestinians by Israelis are done by pilots, aircraft pilots, or drone operators, by high-ranking officers, and almost all of those are Jews of European descent, otherwise known as Ashkenazim. Elor Azaria comes from a more lower socioeconomic strata, and his family is of Arab descent. And the fact that he was charged brought a lot of anger, that which is really ethnically based, of people saying, how come those Israeli elites are allowed to get away with murder, but we are not? And I think that's why a lot of people also came to support him by actually trying to transform the Israeli military into a kind of militia, by which the idea that Palestinian lives are simply free for the taking is something that they have learned from the Israeli government, and why should they be punished when they just follow the lead of the Israeli elites?
Right, and Prime Minister Netanyahu and the current Minister of Defense, Lieberman, specifically rushed to the soldiers' defense. Why did they do that?
Well, they gained very easy populism points, but because they joined this mob, claiming that El Ozaria is the children of all of us, a sort of example of how an Israeli soldier should act. In other ways, should commit murder. Netanyahu compared the family of El Ozaria to a bereaved family of a soldier who died in battle, even though El Ozaria is alive, and to his own family, because Netanyahu's brother also died in battle. And so this kind of populism was a very quick way for some Israeli politicians, most notably the current Minister of Defense, Lieberman, to gain popularity and to raise into high positions of power.
And just outside of the courtroom, when the soldier was pronounced convicted of manslaughter, there were huge demonstrations outside the court. In fact, let's have a look at this young woman who is speaking up, saying that, you know, this young man as a soldier was defending them, meaning the citizens of Israel.
I think that this soldier came to protect about little children, about families, about parents. This guy came to do an attack, to hurt about these families. This soldier is a hero.
So explain the kind of support the soldier was receiving and why people were feeling that he was actually defending them.
The very extreme right groups within Israel have organized this demonstration in front of the courthouse and actually got into violent confrontations with the police, because for them this court case is extremely important. They use it to try to create a carte blanche for all Israeli soldiers, for Israeli colonists, for Israeli police to simply fire their weapons whenever they want against people who are not Jewish, against Palestinians. And for them, the idea that El Ozaria killed a Palestinian justifies everything. And so it doesn't matter if he did that according to regulations. It doesn't matter if he was obeying orders or just did it of his own initiative. It doesn't matter if that Palestinian threatened him or not. The important matter is that he was Jewish and the Palestinian was not. And that gave him the right to use his weapon. And that's why these demonstrations happen, because they're trying to basically justify ethnic cleansing and mass killing of Palestinians.
And then why did the former Minister of Defense, Yalon, and other commanders such as Eisenhot, I think, who spoke out against him, why did they do that?
I think this is the main issue, actually. The fact that there are senior commanders of the Israeli military and the former Minister of Defense who were trying to curb this process, which they call the beastification of the Israeli military, the army turning into a beast. What they're saying is that this idea of the Israeli military becoming a militia, where soldiers can just open fire on Palestinians at will without obeying an organized structure of command, without a clear tactic or strategy for the use of force, is going to be destructive for the Israeli military and for the ability of the government to have any policy at all. And those kind of voices, of course, it has to be said, Yalon, Eisenhot, these are senior military brass of Israel, are people who are architects of the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territory. They are not saints. They are not. They are actually war criminals. But they also understand that if the military goes out of control, then the whole project can collapse. The point is not to use as much violence as possible, but they try to use violence in the areas, in the ways that promote their agenda. And Yalon was trying to say that, and trying to say, well, we have to stop the army from becoming a beast. And people interpreted that as if he was saying, El Ozaria is a beast because he is a Jew of Arab descent. So this was a racial slur against him. which means that he's somehow less human than a Jew of European descent. And Ya'alon actually lost his job. He was fired by Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I think that really accelerates the process of the Israeli military becoming a militia.
Right. So now this particular case, although it's only one of hundreds of Palestinians that have been killed, has a political significance, particularly internationally. Those who are looking at Israel now and the gross human rights violations that are carried out against Palestinians. So this has larger political significance internationally. Explain that, and does this mean that the Israeli military now will have less control over the occupied territories if they're looking at convictions of this sort?
Well, the Israeli military court in this case had absolutely no choice but to convict Elor Azaria. The evidence was overwhelming. I think they didn't want to convict. And actually, in the speech, the Attorney General, the military attorney said, this was not an easy decision for us. We were not happy about the result. We did it very reluctantly. They were reluctant to convict, but they knew that if they do not convict Azaria, the result will be that the International Criminal Court in The Hague will have a very strong case to say there is no justice system within Israel for Israeli soldiers. There is no accountability. When there is no accountability, that implies that the International Criminal Court of Justice has jurisdiction over these cases, and then any Israeli soldier, any Israeli colonist would have a problem traveling around the world. They could be extradited. They could have charges pressed against them on suspicion of committing war crimes. So they had to convict in order to preserve the illusion that there is some kind of accountability for Israeli soldiers. But like I say, it's an illusion because in fact he was only convicted of manslaughter even when it was absolutely clear that he committed murder. And this court case is an attempt to help the Israeli military continue to be able to control the Palestinian territory. But in fact, this turning of the Israeli military into a militia and the increasing calls for the International Criminal Court in The Hague to step up and to start holding Israeli soldiers and officers accountable, that is something that threatens the Israeli control quite a great deal. And the decision of the UN Security Council that was not vetoed by the Obama administration was immediately interpreted within Israel as increasing that very risk. And when Israeli soldiers believe that they are not protected and that in their next vacation in Europe they could be arrested, then we will see a very large number of Israeli soldiers and officers abandoning their posts, refusing to serve in the occupied territory, refusing to participate in the occupation. And that would be a decisive blow against that occupation.
All right, very interesting development. And Shai, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us such good analysis. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.